All right, all right, all right. Here we are. Let's talk about accountability. Science reveals that women are always right. I can't make this up. That was pretty much the title of an article that I'm going to share with you guys today. The bigger topic we're going to talk about, though, is accountability in relationships and how, as a guy, you should run your relationship, what kind of frame you need to have so that there is a certain amount of accountability on both sides, right? That you are able to take accountability as a man for the things that you need to take accountability for without, you know, worry about your partner devaluing you or shaming you or whatever for mistakes if mistakes happen. And then also, well, how can we make sure that our partners, that we're creating the environment in a relationship where our partners can take their own accountability for their mistakes, right? And so a big complaint that you see is from a lot of guys is that women just don't have any accountability. They never apologize. They never admit that they're wrong. And that's one side of the coin. Another side of the coin is you'll see a lot of women will say, you know what I mean, that's actually that will not say, but women will devalue guys in their relationships. They'll add up the offenses and add up the wrongdoings. It seems like a lot of women, not all women, so that, they can sort of devalue their partner, see their partner as less, so to speak, right? And that's what it seems like ends up happening in a lot of relationships. And it's sort of a toxic dynamic that's very, very common, and it causes the relationship demise. And so the guy, from a guy perspective, the guy's always like worrying or thinking, well, if she never apologizes or never takes accountability, and then she's constantly upset or mad about the things that I do, mad at me when things go wrong, or even when I make a mistake, she expects me to admit to my mistakes and apologize. But then, if I'm always the one apologizing, admitting mistakes and admitting faults, and she's not doing any of it, well, then she's basically sending a message to herself that she's can do no wrong and that she's better than I am. And that's going to cause her to continue to think of me as less and less as a partner, build resentment, see me in contempt, and then she's eventually going to want to destroy the relationship, right? And so that's a big concern for the guy on the guy side of it. And it's a real concern because that's exactly what happens a lot of the times. So today we're going to talk about this: female accountability and male accountability, both. All right, how to approach the topic and how to have and set up so that you have frame in your relationships so that your relationship doesn't meet a deadly demise due to this dynamic and this, what we could say, lack of accountability that seems to happen. All right. Got a nice little super chat. I appreciate it. Ozzy says, yo, you've been on fire lately with content. Thanks for helping men along our self-improvement journey. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. And I am here to help. And I just lost my light. What just happened there? Am I out of... oh, wait. How'd that even happen? Oh, man. I don't know if this light's going to work. Look, I got this light because I'm in like this different studio space, and now it's just doing that. Oh, well, that's okay. Maybe this light's better. I got all this equipment. I don't know how to use it. This is called How to Use Equipment Hour with Paul Benjamin. Oh, all right. We'll try this. It's kind of fun. It blinds me, though. No big deal. I don't know if that's better lighting or not. Who cares? You guys will just watch me do you get to see what's behind the scene because I don't know how to do production. So let's now get into the topic here a little bit. So the article is from The Guardian. And I will actually, as we do things, I'll link the articles and the studies and things I'm doing and throw them in the chat for you guys. So if you guys want, don't necessarily log off the things, but um more super chats to support the light budget. Exactly. The lights out, guys. I need more supers to afford a new one. All right. So there is the first article we'll discuss. Um, Scientific reasons on why women are always right. Now, I wish I wish I was making this shit up. You know what I mean? Like I wish that I was the misogynistic crazy. I don't really wish this. But the misogynistic crazy person that all of the ego protecting plebs that never tune into my content think that I am. When I have titles and I have things when in a thumbnail, if you would notice the thumbnail, it was a blonde doing math and she was basically doing it all wrong anyway. And it said, good job, honey. So like these comical little takes that I have, I think they're hilarious, but we have to have a sense of humor about it. The article from the Guardian is literally says scientific reasons on why women are always right. You can't be more like arrogant, egotistical in favor of a gynocentric social order than that. Like it doesn't get worse than that. When I make a joke, right? When I joke around with my thumbnails, have a nice job, honey, and a girl doing math wrong, the plebs that don't watch me, they get upset about it, right? They think I'm this misogynistic, terrible guy, and I'm just here to freaking dunk and bash on women. And the reality is they'll look at an article like this, they'll pass if this was in their whatever awareness, an article titled Scientific Reasons on Why Women Are Always Right. They won't even blink an eye at that. Nobody blinks an eye at that in the normal, in the socially conditioned world. They don't even ask that question. And a lot of people will go, yeah, oh, this is hilarious. And it's fine. If it's done, if it's a joke, I mean, sure, whatever. It's I can laugh at that other side of it too, but we got to recognize that the social order here is not in favor of men. So we can't have, it's not in favor. It's not balanced either. Do you know what I'm saying? And so we can't even have a reasonable discussion about something like accountability out into the normal world without people being triggered, without people bringing in a bunch of ego protecting biases to the table and basically muddying the waters of the discussion. And then of course personal attacks will ensue after that. I'm a misogynistic terrible person who shouldn't be coaching anybody, of course, because I would say something, have a joke about women having to always be right, which is something we all know. Like it's all in our social vernacular awareness. We joke about it. It's comical. The woman's always right and ha 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 ha, right? It's always it's like the hubris the hubris of most women. Like we know it's there, but we're not allowed to comment on it or talk about it reasonably without being tabbed or labeled as a bad person. So know this when you are functioning in the world outside of, a pod class like this one, right? Or in a comment section, that people are going to not take you seriously. In fact, shame you if you try to even have a balanced discussion about accountability in relationships and talking about differences between genders. Like you, as a male, anything in favor or anything even just balanced, we're not even talking about male biased, right? It's going to be seen as threatening. And you're going to be labeled. And that's just the way it is. And plenty of people, whenever I post something, and I get it on my Facebook more than anything else, because Facebook is a lot of people that are in contact with me through other things other than the brand of Apex Mindset. And so, those people are like, oh, there he goes again. And it's like, yeah, they just assume I'm full of shit. They don't have any idea that this is an elevated discussion that we're always having, and that we're talking about nuances and things that will help both men and women, they can't get past their own little biases. All right. So the first rule in even having this discussion is to get past your biases. And that's including if you're a guy who has negative biases towards women on this, right? We want to sort of have a objective understanding. We want to come from a neutral mindset when we look at this stuff. Now, clearly this article here isn't coming from a neutral any kind of neutrality. So I'm going to sort of read through some of this, and then we're going to talk about it in a balanced way, because I want you guys to understand the frame and some of the skills and things you need to bring into the relationship in order to have good relationships with women in this sort of environment we're in, where apparently women are are always right, and therefore don't need to take accountability, and any assumption that they might have to take accountability is sort of looked at shamefully, right? Like, that's kind of where we're at. So article starts off: wondered why your wife is always right each time you're having a brawl. Okay, hold on, I need to do it this way with the because it is too hard to see it on the computer with my new light that went out. Okay, so she often comes out as the winner of the said match and makes you wonder, did I marry a witch? Because you have no plausible explanation to the unexplained psychic power she probably got from falling as a child, while science again has some technical explanation to all the impending mystery. So this guy is very British. He's very British. Troy Francis, I need you to translate this for me, because I don't know what the hell this guy's talking about. All right, next paragraph. Having lived on Earth for somewhat the same length of time, the male and female gender are yet to find a common ground of relatable ways to exist in amenity. The search has propelled science, sociology, and art to give formula and answer to this. This has different schools of thought ranging from different fields amounting to the spiral ideas out there. Okay. I feel like this is story hour from the guy who lifts weights and can't read. I don't know. Is that what you guys are getting the feeling when I read this article? That's what I feel like. All right. 23 years back, a research carried out titled The Mind in the Eyes Test. Well, I'm sure sounds very credible given the title. The Mind in the Eyes Test. All right. Looks into how well one can surmise the thoughts and feelings of others. Its analysis reveals that women would be able to do this, but this is based on the pigeonholed notion of woman's intuition. Further changes for better results and accuracy was adopted, revealing new conclusions say socialization has a lot to do with expertise. Okay. So there's a number of things that this guy is sort of alluding to in the first three paragraphs I want to point out. Okay. And one thing he's pointing out is the confusion that of the normie world, okay, of that men go through when they get into these conflicts or arguments with their girls. Everything gets turned around on them, and then they find themselves apologizing or find themselves the one who's on the receiving end of the accountability, right? And then, wondering, why am I always losing these arguments with my woman, right? Why am I always the one here who's made out to be the person who is at fault? Like, how does she twist this around, right? What kind of wizardry or witchcraft is happening here? That's kind of what he's trying to allude to in the first paragraph in his very British way of explaining it, which is a little confusing for some of us being me. But anyway, but that's what he's trying to say. And it's like, it demonstrates a fundamental lack of empathy and understanding of women from the general populace, right? understand like what we're trying to do here for, for you guys, and is to have better relationships with women. That means better dating, better experiences, better sexual relationships, better long-term relationships, whatever it is you want. You want to have, we want to do better in that area of our lives, right? And so that's what a lot of these elevated discussions are about. And so we're not coming from a perspective of, I can't understand women. You'll never understand them. Okay. That's a trope that's been put out for a long time. And it's really a cop out. It's allows men to not put in any kind of effort into trying to have empathy or understanding for the girls that they're dating or dealing with, right? Or their partner. And so it allows them to sort of allow us guys to sort of shirk that accountability. And the other side of it, which I'm sure people are trying to probably type in the chat frantically now, as if they've already said that, is that of course women are, that's convenient, right? Now, us not being able to understand women is convenient because it allows for more deception. All right. So now we look into evolutionary psychology a little bit and how we're wired. Okay. Which is the next point in the next paragraph, is that we've existed for all of this time, yet we can't seem to come together in communication. Right. And this is true. All right. This is true. And the reason this is true is because men and women, by nature, we're divisive. We're not actually complementary by nature. Now, that doesn't mean we can't be complementary by putting effort into our relationships and evolving and elevating ourselves, right? From our chimpanzee automatic behavioral states. We can elevate ourselves, be better, and be complementary towards each other. But we're complementary to each other in a reproductive way. In other words, fitting together in order to reproduce. That's the way that we're complementary. But in terms of cohabitating, coexisting, and being successful and happy, we're very divisive. Okay. And and those things go together. So those two things can be true at the same time, because what might be good for mating and short-term mating, and understand most mating was short-term mating for most of our history, right? Because infanticide was so high, and people may have, although they may have the capacity to live into older ages, people generally died pretty young due to some threat or ailment or some problem, right? So people were dying a lot quicker without medical care, without medical science, and kids were dying, at a much higher rate back then through most of our history, which means having a lot of babies and having short-term mating situations was the strategy for most of our history. So a divisive relationship with women is more complementary to mate switching, having babies with different people, and so on, right? So when we understand that, and then it's also, there's certain things that one or the other is trying to get right from each other. We're trying to get something from each other in terms of, I'm talking just the animal parts of us, right? Guys want their paternity and they want sexual access, and women want, sexual access to the best guy they can get, and they want to get guys to take care of their needs while they're effectively disabled as a pregnant person. And I'm talking again back into the, tribal times, the evolutionary times, right? The primate versions of ourselves, more or less, right? Early humans. Okay. Obviously, now technology, things are different, but our brains evolved through most of our history to be divisive. I say, why divisive? Because women and men have to use certain things to have power over each other. Now, for men, it was violence and coercion. So men used, through most of our history, we used violence and we used coercive methods to get what we wanted, which made us, because we're the stronger of the sexes, and we're the stronger of the sexes. And so that was our default. This made us less apt to develop the social skills. All right. We had to certainly develop some social skills because we could always be overtaken by, if not by multiple cohorts of stronger people. So the strongest male can be taken down by three or four weaker males, for example. And those three or four weaker males were coerced, or not coerced, but manipulated into that takedown process, let's say by women. And so we look at chimpanzees, we look at gorillas, we look at primates, we see some complex social things happening, where the alpha males are being taken down by, two or more weaker males, right? And those weaker males are more or less, into some sort of alliance to do that. And they get into this alliance potentially because of mating excess, right? For other females who normally those females would go mate with the alpha male, but for some reason, due to however the alpha male is running that tribe, that that they decide they don't really want him in charge anymore, and these are things that happen like in chimpanzee, observations, right? And so we're not that much different. We're different enough, like the differences we have make us extremely different, but from a genetic perspective, we're not. We have a lot of these traits, we have a lot of these tendencies. And so understanding that, like, we are divisive and how we fit together, and the way of that is men tend, we divert to violence or coercion. But here's the thing: violence or coercion is not a method that is available to us now anymore, because of which is a good thing, right? For the most part, because of societal rules. And in an evolved society that is more peaceful and less violent, the male default mechanism of handling a problem, right, is taken away. So men don't have their default, natural default, which is to use coercion or violence. So we have to default to better social awareness and social framing. Okay. Which is fine. Like, it's not, I don't see that as a bad thing. I'm just observing, right? That's what it is. Women, they have, being the weaker of the sexes, had to use manipulation and deception to get what they wanted, right? And so even the aspect of, from down to the mating aspect of things, is deceptive when you look at the fact that women, unlike human women, don't indicate externally that they're ovulating. Now, we know that there are external features. We can tell when a woman's ovulating by certain externalities, but they're very indirect and very deceptive. Like, so it's not even, like, whereas, like, for example, monkeys, their reproductive organ swells up, and that's how we know that that woman is in heat, right? When the human animal is in heat, there's no swelling, like there's no overt. I mean, again, we know subtle signs, but those things are very subtle. It's not as overt, right? So even the act of mating, and hormonally, when a girl's horny and is in the body's telling her to get pregnant, is deceptive to the men in the community that she's in. You know what I mean? That's even being deceived. And so by nature, mating has been deceptive for us. So this a fantasy. So we got to dispel that fantasy right now. The fantasy out there is that men and women fit together, perfect harmony, get married, say some things under your version of the religion, and now you're together forever and everything's good. When the reality is, we did not evolve to be together forever. We did not evolve to fit together, okay, other than through divisive means. We evolved to fit together for reproductive things, okay, but we're trying to get things out of each other. Now, we are human beings. We can move past our evolutionary imperatives to have long lasting, happy relationships. How do we know this? Because percentages of people are doing it all the time. That's why. So we know it's possible. We know we can do it. It's just that we have to evolve our way of thinking, and we have to take those instinctual drives and point those into different directions in order to get what we want, so we can fit together more in harmony with our partners, right? Versus divisively. And so that's one thing we got to understand here, is that there's this divisive nature, right? And so back to, the art, and it's like we haven't figured out how to fit together, right? And so now where he's going in this article is talking about woman's intuition or intuition. And what he's saying is somewhat true, which is that, socialization has a lot to do with expertise. In other words, socialization or social skills to include game. Okay. Game is interaction with the opposite sex in this context, right? So game, holding frame, and social skills is a skill set that you can train or learn. I don't agree with this person's article. I'm not going to agree with their thesis in this article. However, this observation is true that socialization has a lot to do with, expertise. And some of that expertise is what we would call intuition. But here's what the article is not saying. Intuition is a learned skill. Okay. In other words, you may not have so intuition is just picking up on, let's say, someone's intentions, motivations, thoughts, feelings, perspectives based on the things that they're not saying, based on, let's say, body language, based on facial expressions, based on the wording of things, based on not only what's being said, but what isn't being said, based on behavior. So all of the indirect means of communicating or displaying these messages are picked up intuitively. And intuition, though, it's a skill, it's our ability we can learn how to pick these things up better. How do I know? Because we train people to do it all the time. I was trained to do it, okay, to 2 degrees. Other people are trained. So what do I mean by trained? Well, CIA operatives, special operations, intelligence collectors, right? FBI agents, law enforcement, they're all trained to some degree. Some of them better than others. Some of them really suck at it. Some of them are really good at it. But they're all trained to be able to pick up things and cues for human motivation outside of what is being directly said. And a lot of communication and socialization involves being able to pick these things up, how to relate to somebody, how to have rapport with somebody else, those different things, how to have game with your girl, how to make your girl feel attracted to you versus feeling repelled by you. A lot of these things are based on these social skills, which are in fact skills. And what he's about to allude to is probably how women are more naturally better at these skills, which should be a correct statement. Then the erroneous conclusion will be, though, that means women are always right, but but that's where he's going with this, I think. So we'll continue with the article. From the study came the birth of others that looked in and studied this unique feature of women. With further probing, scientists at the University of Cambridge found that the research that women have mind-reading gene mutation that gives them power like mutants to understand someone's thought and emotion by simply looking at the eyes. All right, I'll finish the paragraph. This solves the mystery of cognitive empathy, as it is called. So beware that your wife or girlfriend is not a witch who flies on the magic broom, nor is she spying on you. Rather, she is more developed social being. It's not, she's not a mutant. Okay. All it is that so they're saying that women have a gene mutation that allows them to understand someone's thoughts and emotions through eye contact. I'm going to challenge that statement a little bit because there may be some gene mutations in some women, but I don't know from that study how they're really correlating that into mind reading, right? Obviously, and I'm sure they're not. Okay. I'm sure the people at Cambridge are not saying women are mind readers. That would be way off the charts in terms of, you know, things I mean, that would be all over the media, not just in this dumb Guardian article, right? The reason why it's not, and when you look at it, it's not what it is. The reason why it's presented that way is because we have a journalist who doesn't understand science. Okay. That's really what we have here. Now, when we look at it, though, what are we saying? So there may be some genetic expressions that are demonstrating that women have better skills, let's say, at picking up on emotions and motivations through nonverbal communication. This would be true. Okay. And this makes sense because when guys were out, we were tool focused is in, setting those goals and achieving them, coming up with steps, analyzing processes, right? Um, this is why men tend to do better at and flock more to the STEM, world and, engineering, for example, and research based sciences and degrees and stuff like that. It's not that women can't do it. It's just that by larger numbers, we're more capable of those things. Whereas women, well, if women were staying behind, rearing and taking care of children, and managing the social environment back in the tribe to utilize resources the most effectively, right? So it's women who are building social alliances, social circles, right? Moving up and down social hierarchies had to do with a lot of the social interaction that women were having. Okay. Not so much the men. The men were more or less competition and results based, right? Whereas women were about who likes who can build what alliance, those sorts of things. We know that from a lot of research. It's not really that debated. And also women have to be able to raise and protect kids and understand the needs of a child when that child is not able to verbalize what his or her needs are. And so women do have a better ability of being able to sympathize with another person's emotions and being pick up. And so what do I say sympathy? What do I mean? Identify with the emotions. That's what that means. So when that kid is crying a certain ability to tell, well, he needs to be burped or he's needs to be changed, or perhaps he's hungry, or perhaps he's just bored, or maybe he needs a nap, right? And you see mothers all the time without very much training become very in tune with determining what they need based on those things. And women carry that ability over into their relationships and into their social relationships. It's a very good skill. This is what makes, we're too busy dunking on women in men's health spaces. We're not giving them enough credit for things that they're genetically wired towards, even just outside of rearing children, or even talking about the nuances of why that is. Women make great salespeople. Women can be really good in terms of marketing, depending on how that is, because in marketing, sales, and building rapport and all that stuff. And it's not just because of their sexuality or something and getting guys, although that is part of it, unfortunately. But it's really, women have an ability to pick up on social cues and social things that's more natural than most guys, right? And so that's because taking care of children, you're often having to figure out what their needs are without them being able to tell you, and having the women who could do that the best had kids that survived more often, really. And so it makes sense. It makes sense that Cambridge found some gene expressions that said that women are more apt or better at this. We don't even need necessarily that. We know that behaviorally they're better at the social stuff. And so this is where, women that you're getting with. Dude, I dropped out. How long ago did I drop out? Let's see. I have no idea. So I'm back. This is 37 minutes. I have no idea how long I was dropped off. Um, yeah, we got some weather up here in northern Michigan, so it may screw up my stream a little bit. Um, Anybody got a time? I see that the nearest comment here was at 12:44, so I should have been only out maybe a minute. Okay, cool. Well, good. I was out for a minute, and from that break, I'll finish that point I was making. Then I can go backwards a minute in my brain, which was that okay? The reason why you guys are running into a lot of pain in your relationships with women, losing frame, losing things, is because they are more genetically wired and better at social maneuvering than you are. They are better at picking up your cues in terms of. I'm adjusting some things. So hopefully it'll continue and I won't have to kill the stream, but we'll keep going. So they're better at picking up at your on your cues, emotional cues and things of that nature in order to um in order to really manipulate a situation and end up coming out of these arguments or conflicts as being the person who's in the right or whatever. They can manipulate you more emotionally and mentally. They're just better at it from a genetic level. And again, because they evolved functioning in maneuvering socially and taking care of children's and picking up on social cues and nonverbal communication. They're better at that, like naturally, than you are. However, that being said, those things are skill sets and skill sets you can learn. And as a male, you're more dominant and you're more determined and more capable of a lot of different things. And you have more assurance in a way than what there's downfalls that women have naturally to those things, which is why they will defer to your leadership, provided that you hold frame. But because we fit together divisively, there's going to be a tendency for a woman to want to challenge that frame when she feels insecure or uncertain about her prognosis for the future with you. right? So she's going to have a natural, there's something that's natural, no matter how, trustworthy and how alpha and how strong you are as a guy, and no matter what needs you're taking care of, there's times where that frame will get challenged. You know what I mean? And how often that happens and how that happens will depend on you, will depend on the woman, the relationship dynamics, and those sorts of things. But this is why you need these communication skills, right? Because without them and without being trained in them, you're just not going to do well in your relationships. It's going to be too, having like for example, red pill knowledge about how women are, but not having the skills to deal with that knowledge puts you in a place of frustration, because you end up in these relationships with women, you see what they're doing, it's what they're naturally doing, and how they're more or less, you know, taking that, trying to take power in that relationship in maybe less productive or divisive or toxic ways. You see the road that leads down, which is you basically being enslaved to some girl's imperative who doesn't like you very much. You see that those things lead to the demise of your relationships, but you don't know how to fix it or stop it. So we tend to then just blame the woman, get mad at women, and get angry about it. Well, the reality is, though, that's not going to help you have better relationships. And better relationships are available to you. Like having a great time in your dating life and having a great time with women is all on the table for you. Like there's all the things, the blue pilled things you dreamt about, you can have those and more than that, because it'll be rooted in reality and not fantasy. But you have to learn the skills, though, in order to have those things, because naturally as men, you're outmatched. From a genetic perspective, she outmatches you. She can tell and pick up on shit that you can't with her without some training. And so, but we know you can be trained into it, right? We know it's something that you can train for. This is a good break now to, of course, grift my shit, right? I do have my year-long seduction program. Okay, schedule a free consult. See if you're a good fit for that. That gets guys prepped for a year to have the best relationships that they'll ever have and that could ever have with women by learning these skills. And guys are doing it every single day, every single, all the time in this program with me. It's really good. It's valuable for guys who want to have good relationships, whether you're in a relationship and you want to keep it going, whether your relationship is falling apart, you want to repair it, whether you just got through a breakup and you want to get over that better and have better things in the future, or whether or not, you're just in the dating market and you want to have better options, better choices, and a better time, right? Some of you guys just even getting some results is really all you're looking for, and that's fine. You need to learn the skill sets. That's why I do what I do. It's to teach you these skills so that you can hold frame, and that makes you a better partner for the girl. That's ultimately what she wants. She doesn't want to really take over everything and out manipulate and outmaneuver you and then feel like you're less of a man and devalue you. That's not really her goal. Okay, unless she is an absolute narcissist or something. With that, we'll jump into my quick 1 minute break of a commercial, and we'll come back and finish our cast. Let's face it, if you're a man, then you are probably dealing with problems and challenges with women. Now, I've got some good news and some bad news for you. Your success with women literally boils down to one thing. The bad news is, if you don't have it, nothing else will work. All of the money, good looks, and all of the best pickup and game skills out there will fail without you mastering this one thing. And that one thing is frame. The answers to ending your pain and suffering and to start living an amazing life with women is just one click away. Click the link and let's get started. Are you? All right. So there's my frame commercial once again, for those of you who've seen it. So look, frame is how you lead. I'll say control, but control has a negative connotation. Frame is how you lead the relationship and the dynamic between you and that girl, so that her naturally advanced social skills don't manipulate and overtake your goals in that relationship and put her in the leadership role where she doesn't want to be. Okay. So to understand that dynamic, it's like it's that women want to know that their mating imperative and that their goals will be taken care of, right? We can translate that to logically, like in human speak, women just want to know that they're going to be good, that they're going to have a good life and have all the good things and that they would want in that life, whether that's family and kids, whether that's lots of parties and a boat, okay, whether that's, financial stability, whether that's traveling, whatever it is they have in their minds, okay, as a successful good life, they want to know that through their mating choices that they're going to be led into further into having that life. Okay, and each girl has different goals. Don't think that every girl is an OnlyFans chick who goes on podcasts and they all want millions of dollars in a boat. All right, there's plenty of women out there that don't care about that stuff. Sure, they'll take the millions of dollars, obviously, but they don't care about a certain lifestyle. And in fact, they might reject a guy who has that kind of a lifestyle like that because maybe they just want a family. Maybe they just want a quiet life. Maybe they just want. There's a lot. Okay, and all those girls look good naked. All right, so don't think that because she's not on Instagram showing her butthole that she must not be attractive. There's plenty of women in all over the globe who are absolutely attractive. They're more attractive than some of the women that present themselves as, low value celebrities on OnlyFans or Instagram or wherever they're trying to get internet clout from, right? That seems to be what people notice. You know what I mean? When you're scrolling your social media and it's some chick with a nice butt, doing some short video about nothing or whatever, and all it is her showing off her assets. Like, okay, there's 10 other girls just like her who look just as good who aren't doing that. And they have different goals. Okay. So that's another thing to sort of suss out here, blow through that myth. For whatever your lifestyle is, there's girls that are attractive that will want to fit that lifestyle. All right. So you don't need to change that part about you. Checking out this super here, man. So like this light, by the way, it's like, I don't know how these Hollywood people do that, man, but the light like blinds me. And so then I look at my computer, I can't even see what I'm doing. Afi, what's up, bro? I love this guy, man. Go to Afi Kingdom's, all of his stuff and watch his stuff and buy his books too. I got to plug you. That's my bro, dude. Alfie's the man. Alfie's the man. So he's got really good stuff, expert level game too. So thanks, bro. Thanks for showing up and throwing a little super my way. So anyway, back to the topic. Yeah. So you guys got to learn those skills though, and you guys in its frame, right? Frame skills are what your masculine manner of holding frame in your relationship is what gets you past her advanced communication abilities. Okay. She's probably more advanced than you, at least naturally speaking. Right now, granted, you can work on it, get really good game and stuff, and that's going to help you. And that's part of the process, right? Is getting those skills. However, when it comes down to, the frame is you're holding through reward and removal of reward and punishment. In a way, you're holding the keys to that good life that she envisions and that she wants someday. That's kind of what it is. You have the answers to what she's envisioning as success for her, right? And you demonstrate those things through the things you're doing together and the relationship you're building together and the good feelings you have together, but also through your boundaries, through your standards, through the way you see the world, through the things you spend your money on, through the things that you choose to do recreationally and the things you don't choose to do, right? That is the behavioral aspect of the relationship. And so behaviorally, she's falling to the goals and the actions that get her to the better place, then you're leading it there, right? And through your dominant masculine presence and ability to take action with certainty, you're leading, to the relationship where you want to go. So she may be better, let's say, and then of course you'll have developed because you do my work, right? Hopefully, and you train in these skills, you'll have the game skills to communicate well with her. You know what I mean? So that she is not only not able to outmaneuver you, okay, socially and take over the frame, all right? But she has no motivation. It's not even about her not being able to, because you could be with a woman who's better at that than like just you could be with that woman still, even after some training. However, what's her motivation in doing it? She doesn't really want to be the man in the relationship, but she only will challenge that frame, challenge that frame, challenge that frame if she doesn't trust that she's going to have that good life that she is envisioning. And that trust doesn't happen. That trust erodes for a number of reasons, but if she's not experiencing good things regularly with you, and if it doesn't appear that you're going in the right direction, and if you don't have certainty and confidence in the direction that you're going in, that will cause her to question the relationship and question you as that dominant alpha male. And that questioning makes her go, okay, the masculine traits I'm hoping he has, I'm not seeing. So now I have to bring that to the relationship. I have to bring that to the table, which means I have to take over some of this frame, which means I have to maneuver socially to convince him to do things that I want, to convince him of things otherwise. Maybe I need to maneuver things around to make him see his faults and see how wrong he is, so he changes his behavior so that we can have what I want, right? Or perhaps I have to devalue him a little bit so he's less confident, so I can take over because he's not as competent, and his lack of competence is going to put us in the right direction. You see, these are the things that happened, and motivationally for a girl, and will cause her to challenge her framework. And so that's the thing, right? And so back to my little thing, okay, year-long program, click that button and get into that program. If you're a good candidate, schedule your interview, for it, and we can see if it's a good fit. All right. But this whole video isn't just to grift that, but I'm just telling you, that's what's going to give you the skills. That's what's going to give you the framework. You'll have impeccable frame by the time you're through with that program, if you're following, of course, everything. But most people do when they see those. Yeah, pretty much all people do, I think. I haven't really had any complaints. So back to now this article, right? So now you have that understanding of some of those things. So accepting a plus on women is that they are good socially. And here's the thing, guys, too. You can use that to your advantage, dude. Like, that's not a detriment. That's a good thing. I mean, your goal as a man when you're with your woman is to try to find the things that she does well and that she does better than you, even, so that you can have her bring those things to the relationship. You can employ her, delegate those things to her. You know what I mean? Like, for example, like my girlfriend is infinitely better at organizing certain things than me. Like when she organizes the kitchen, okay, and I'm not trying to make this a gendered thing. It's just the way it is. She's just better at it, dude. Like I open, like when she's organizing like pantry, throwing stuff away, moving stuff around, right? It's like I open it and it's like, holy crap, dude. Like, this is nice. You know what I mean? And it's way better than if I were to put that effort into that. Just as is, it's something that she's got a strength on that. And so, like, of course, I'm going to rather she does that than me, and it's not about the gendered aspect of it. It's just about, she's providing value to our relationship by being able to do those things. So we can delegate her to do that. Feels good for her. It's not me employing her like she's my slave or anything. I do a lot of things to take care of her too. So part of your goals here is to be able to find things. And socially, some of you guys who are like, I'm a coder, You quiet alphas out there, right? Nothing wrong with being that guy. That's a good thing. But that means you might not be as maneuverable socially. So what does that mean? Employed She can be employed to do that. You know what I mean? And when I say employed to do that, I mean it's like she can be the one to be like, hey, let's do something this weekend. I contacted some friends or whatever. Let's go out as couples. Let's do this thing. Let's do that thing. Hey, so and so's anniversary or whatever. Let's throw a party. Oh, it's your mom's birthday. Don't forget. You know what I mean? Stuff that us type A, less, more goal focused alpha males, right? Types, right? We forget shit. We forget to call our friends. We forget to. I'm bad at this, by the way. So even my clients don't be mad at me if I seem to not be in communication. It's just I'm just so goal focused that I'm just doing what's in front of me all the time. I'm like a freaking juggernaut charging through the next thing. This affects me, negatively sometimes in my planning. I got my assistant, who's a female, will sometimes be like, "Hey, remember that thing you're supposed to do about this? Like, what about that?" Like, I tell her to bug me so that while I'm juggernauting through one task after another, if I'm forgetting about something, she brings it to my attention. That's part of what I have her doing for me. And so this is what I mean about like fitting together with women in a way that's not divisive, though our genetics may be sort of pointing us in that direction. If we let it go there, we can use our human brains to fit together in a way that's complementary. And you holding the frame as a man, that's your job to ensure that that complementary relationship exists. You ensure it two ways. One is by picking a capable woman. In other words, a woman who's capable of being a good complement to you, a good match, and has at least a good baseline to work with so that you can move things along in the frame of the relationship. And then the other thing is obviously the holding of that frame and managing that relationship. All right. But understanding, in this article is pointing it out, that she is more, at least genetically wired to be more socially capable than you. That may be something some of you quiet types can employ your girls to do. And, I see that all the time. In fact, in an extreme example, I'll use my friend Justin over in Toronto, who's a pickup artist and does pickup boot camps. He's also a club promoter. He employs women all the time. His whole business is he's very socially maneuverable and very good, right? Socially, but he makes good connections with girls, and then those girls make connections with other girls, and then they bring all these girls to the party. He's employing the girls to do the work for him, essentially, because it benefits them. They enjoy doing it. It's easy for them, and it benefits them. And then it benefits him in his business, right? This is not a guy who's trying to compete with women in a divisive way. He's he's using even the casual, party goers, right? That come in and out of his party promotions. Like he's utilizing those things in a complementary way for both parties. And so this is what the smart person does. And hopefully you guys who, some of you guys who are in that anger phase a little bit about female nature and some of the ways that you've sort of been harmed, hopefully you can pull yourself out of that and recognize that there are things you can do here where you create a complementary environment for yourself and for women. You know what I mean? Even in the casual dating, even in networking. And so women being very socially maneuverable and capable and being very natural at that is something you can use to your advantage. You know what I mean? So back to this article though, which is more or less divisive against men, of course. Um, let's see. Let me do a check there. All right, we're still we're still going. Just making sure. Oh man, make sure you guys hit that like button, all that stuff. Do me that favor because this stream has come in and out a couple of times, and I don't know that I'm going to get all the engagement that we should get. And we're actually talking about some pretty good stuff here, and we're getting into some good things. Okay, so continue on from trying to find the spot where I left off here. Okay, without direct communication. A woman is capable to communicate, deducing from everything around her, thus making her the ultimate sociologist. There's a lot of hyperbole in this article. This explains why women do well in tests that necessitate reading nonverbal cues. Yes, women are good at nonverbal cues. A woman's ability to sense things, the intuitive nature, some speculate, is solely because they are mothers of they are mothers of the earth, and a woman's thinking rises from her brain and, most importantly, from her heart. All of these tally the mythical and mind reader attributes. Okay. This is part of the problem and the downfall, okay, of productive male and female communication is dudes who write articles like this and cannot help themselves from simping, right? And placating and pedestalizing uh female nature in women. Like, look, women are better at certain indirect communication and social cues. That's fine. That's factual. This guy makes it, you know, she's their mothers of the earth. And, this thinking rises from her brain and her heart. Like, it's like, holy crap, hopefully she reads this, bro. You know what I mean? But it's that kind of stuff that builds up, unfortunately, the ego in a way that makes it hard for some women to admit fault in relationships, which can be the downfall of that relationship. And so we're going to get into that a bit too once this article is done. Is being right a woman's prerogative? As often enough, husbands go back in meekness to say, what you said was true. Or some do not even admit at all in order to have the last say and have their ego less bruised and bashed. A woman pursuit is usually more detail oriented and can multitask. With all of these, is able none regardless to still have her sixth sense sharp. So right now, this guy is showing that example of pedestalizing women. Women are, there's no research to say that no one's multitasking. They're not more detail oriented. However, socially though, they can be more detail oriented because they pick up on more things, right? And they can sort of, we've done even through brain scans that in conversations, women have different parts of their brain working and they're connecting different things differently than a guy can, where a guy can be very linear in his thinking. And so if you've ever been around a bunch of women who are in a more or less a positive extroverted mindset and having a conversation, it's like sometimes there's four conversations happening at the same time. They're talking over each other. They're but not in a way that's divisive. They're chiming in. There's this. It's all it's like all over the place, right? And as a guy in your linear brain structure, that can be like exhausting and hard to even gauge or pick up on what's happening. And then of course we as men, like, you know, a lot of times in the men's help spaces and channels, it's like, oh, it's a bunch of chattering women. Like, we downplay that, right? Which comically it's funny, okay, but at the same time, though, think about it. It's not really something we need to downplay necessarily. We can probably look at that as just a different way of communicating, and they're actually picking up on a lot of different things that us as men we're not necessarily picking up on. Now, if we have goal-oriented or task-focused communication, for example, the sort of staying on the ball and having more of a linear focus, that structure is probably better, right? Because that's what we did as men, right? To get resources, right? But in terms of having a broader understanding and an in-depth understanding and also understanding of emotions, some of this more circular communication can be more beneficial. They're better at that. Okay. So this guy is pedestalizing women, but the reality is there's some truth to some of those things that are good for us to recognize and not just shit all over it. Okay. Because we want to be able to accept women for what they are. That includes their faults, but as well as their attributes, things that they have to bring to the table too. So he continues the bridge of the communication between men and women, even after leaving together for centuries. I think I meant living, has not found perfection. So communication among these species have been sort of which are thus captured in films like What Women Want. So he's using chick flicks and chick crack as support for his stuff here, which emphasize in the on this added with several sociological studies to bridge the feuding communication gap between X and Y chromosomes. These films show how perfect communication is gotten when a man who is now gifted. Okay, so you're talking about those movies, right? So a man is now gifted with the ability to understand the inner workings of a woman, and how when the supernatural power is lost, the communication breach is built again. All right. Though counter narratives are evolving, like What Men Want, played by Taraji Henson, who walks in a male dominated environment but is not able to succeed as well as nailing the perfect relationship. Um, the fact that women have double X chromosomes, this guy is really reaching here on some things. High level of estrogen hormones and genetic variants on chromosomes 3, according to scientists, are plausible explanations as to why women are always right and notable reasons to women's longevity, hence outliving men. So these spur a woman's psychic mind reading powers. Can't make this shit up. So the claim of the article now is to take like the true aspects of female communication and to basically put it on such a yeah, good point. The sentence structure alone he's reaching. Yeah, seriously. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, no, this is a big reach now. Again, nothing wrong with, you know, appreciating and understanding the things that women are genetically predisposed to. I don't think we do that enough, to be honest. And the reason we don't do that enough is because we, unfortunately, it's actually, I would say, that's a lot of things that we can blame the gynocentric space for that. Okay, the female centered space, because women are trying to, through feminism and feminist ideals, um, increase their value by directly competing with men on what would be considered male driven traits. In other words, I can do anything a man can do type of a narrative. And then to try to compete with men on things that men are classically or genetically more predisposed to being better at, instead of embracing, you know, the things that women are just better at. Okay. And there are things that are women are just more genetically predisposed to being better at. And that's okay too. We're not here as men to compete with women on those things. We're here to employ them. In other words, let's come together so we can have complementary relationships instead of divisively. You know what I mean? Um, and so to finish that, I'll just finish only two more paragraphs. Saying that women are irrational just might be a defense mechanism against a patriarchal society that has robbed men of emotional experiences. Oh, there we go. We got to throw in something about the patriarchy if we're a journalist in today, don't we? The scientific studies in social science and social neuroscience succinctly beef up the initial stereotype perception of women as mind readers. So the reasons are more biological than mythical. This quality of a woman has fostered the mythical idea of a mind reader, witch, and so much more unclaimed titles. There's no harm to believe that a woman's intuition is a very strong sense, affirming by saying behind every successful man is a woman, oh, who takes half of his shit in a divorce. Anyway, behind every successful man is a woman. And this is all thanks to her supernatural abilities. Okay, there's no supernatural abilities going on. There's simply skill sets in communication, right? That they're more predisposed to. And this has to do with brain development. And this has to do with some sensory development and some things on a genetic level. That's okay. That doesn't mean we can't have skills in communication as well. It only alludes to the fact that if we want to have good relationships, we need to specifically train on how to communicate better and how to recognize indirect communication and social cues. When I say social cues, I'm referring to, things like body language and voice inflection and word choices and things like that, right? Like picking up on things better and picking up on the indirect better, and even being able to communicate indirectly better is something that we should be working on as men. That's part of what working on your game is. You know what I mean? And that's part of what being able to have frame in your relationships and having a good, happy, healthy relationship and a happy partner is being able to, you know, have that understanding of each other. And that understanding happens because you can understand her better because you pick up on all of these cues better. And then you can communicate to her, right, in a way that resonates with her better. So you get more emotional buy-in to whatever it is you guys are dealing with and the direction you're going, right? And so these things are good skills. They're skills to develop. And it's a fallacy to say that an alpha male type wouldn't or doesn't have these skills. These skills are not, if you're thinking these social skills are a means of placating to women and a means of trying to convince women, of your point of view, or convince and sort of placate to your girlfriend, then you are very confused, I would say, and probably somebody who has not come from a perspective of, we could say, the archetypical alpha male in your past. You probably have a past of not being that person, and now you're trying to be that person, and you think that it involves not having communication skills. That's very wrong, because having communication skills and buy-in is part of leadership. And you can do that from a position of dominance, not from a position of subservience or submission. Okay. And so being able to have better communication skills and frame, it comes from a position of leadership and dominance as a male. So you're not giving anything up from that. Yeah. And so that article was a bit silly in the conclusions, but they brought up some interesting things and points. Okay. And so we'll blow through some other things here because I have a whole lot of other notes. All right. So, one thing is, let's talk about the concept of apologizing in general. Now, I've said this many times. You guys who know my work know how I feel about this. Okay. But like, I'm not somebody, there seems to be a trope going on in the red pill that some of my friends that I respect dearly in their perspective seems to promote this idea that never apologizing, specifically never apologizing to a woman. And I'm going to go on record to say that that's bullshit. Okay. That's absolutely untrue. And I think that people who take such a hard stance on that are not actually coming from a place of ultimate dominance, right? It's really more, I would say, of a lesser dominance. Okay. They're not so weak. It's still coming from a place of weakness, just not quite as weak as placating, right? And so let's look at the nature of apologies in general, because a lot of you guys have been told never to apologize. And you've been told that that is a very common thing. And some of you guys are going to react very harshly to me saying this, at least in your heads, whether it's in the comments or not. I mean, because we have males that, that a lot of you guys might admire who adhere to that concept. Now, first of all, you got to understand that interpersonal relationships are different than public personas. So being apology averse when holding frame to the public is probably good advice. Okay. The reason why is because your haters, and I have a bunch of haters now, right? That's rather new for the last year. Almost, I have some haters, okay? But my haters don't care about anything, and they're motivated by sadistic motivations. I talked about this last 2 days. Okay. So the people that come on to slam me publicly, for example, in my comment sections or on Twitter or whatever, they're just looking to take somebody down. It's that bully, the same thing that motivates a bully, not that they're capable of ever bullying me, but it's, I want to degrade this person in some way to make myself feel better. That's what sadistic is. And they've done the research to know that the internet behavior specifically is not coming from a place of justice or, you know, um, evolved or higher motivations. It's not coming from a place of what we could say is goodness, right? A moral, it's not coming from a place of morality. It's coming from a place of sadism, of being sadistic. In other words, I want to try to take this person down and make myself feel better. And so I may say something that triggers, let's say, some aspect of, somebody's, how they see the world, how they see women, or how they see, the sexual marketplace. I may say something challenging to that may make them feel threatened. They see me as a male who spent some time in the gym and has tattoos, who's, a white dude, right? With the voice inflection that I have, right? Like all of these, whatever it is they got going in their mind to stereotype me negatively. And then me saying something that doesn't resonate with them very well, it kind of goes against their worldview. They're not looking to try to understand. They're not looking to try to accept or to try to learn or to have any relationship with me. They're looking at me in order to try to take me down. And so their negative comments or whatever, all of those things, it's based in sadism. Now, let's say I do make a mistake, and let's say I do something and it's public. Well, if I apologize, all of those haters are really just, if I make an apology or make some amends to the people that are haters, they don't care about me. They're motivated by sadistic, motivations. They only care. I am nobody to them. I'm just a meme to them. I'm just a person on the other side of the screen. I'm not a real human being to them. And so if I were to, like, let's say, apologize about something to my haters, or, oh, maybe I should correct, right? And sort of try to, admit these faults, they're just going to jump on those faults and look at that as a reason to, continue to try to take me down and whatever, right? If they could, if they could fight so hard and put me out of business and put me homeless and even put me dead, some of these people would be okay with that, because to them, I'm not a real person. So when we look at public stuff and apologies, like whether Trump should apologize or, right, for example, stuff like that, right, about something, right, and they never do apologize, it's probably based on good advice, because publicly apologies are going to just lead to more attacks and more people who are only motivated in seeing your demise find more reasons to try to hunt after your demise. So apologies publicly in the public world need to be I'm not saying never to apologize either there, but it needs to be approached differently. Some accountability is good, but being, the apology element of it needs to be treaded lightly or carefully, because those people are really just there to take you down. You know what I mean? And so, like in these interviews, like they're interviewing, like the Andrew Tate interviews, where some BBC person, or whether it's Pierce Morgan or whatever, is like, well, do you take those statements back? And do you apologize? That person who's doing the interview is just looking for a gotcha moment. They're just looking to take down, in this example, Andrew Tate, right, for something he said. And so probably for him saying, no, I don't take it back, and not apologizing, that's probably on good advisement, because it's really just fuel for haters. It's nothing productive there. Now, I'm talking about that for a reason, because That's what we see. And that's what we see when we look to the outside world to sort of get some guidance when it comes to accountability and apologies. But what we're neglecting here is that our personal relationships are not these things that we see out on the internet. Your relationship with your girlfriend or your wife is not the same thing as, let's say, Andrew Tate in whatever that BBC girl is, or Pierce Morgan, or whatever interview he's doing. Those are not the same relationships. So a lot of guys who are trying to find their way in the world, right, are following advice and emulating behavior that they see that's being done in a public. We'll use like Trump as an example too. He's done things he shouldn't have done, flat out, right? But he doesn't. I understand why. He's not going to placate to haters, right? Well, people will see that and think, well, then in my personal relationships, it would be weak for me to take accountability, apologize, and what have you. And that's wrong, because they're two different contexts. When you're dealing with your girl or your best friend or your mom or your family member, these are not people, and they shouldn't be people, who are haters. They're not people who have dehumanized you and see you as a representation of a bunch of things, but not as an actual person. These are people you're in relationship with, who see your humanness and who should be, at least if they're a relationship of some sort with you, they should be caring about your well-being. They should care about you as a human being. The problem with the internet is we don't care about each other as human beings. People who come out and throw hate and shade at me, they don't see me as human, right? And so that's the problem. That's the issue with, and we've now simulated this internet online communication and behavior, as we've mixed that with what we should be doing in our real relationships. At least a lot of people have. And that's where it comes out of, and this is where people even I know and have worked with have been like, never apologize, blah, blah, blah. That is fucking wrong. Because in a personal relationship, that's different than a public situation. That's different than these internet, we'll say, connections or whatever you have with people, right? That's different than dealing with someone's negative comment or some bullshit argument on your Facebook or Twitter. All right. A personal relationship is different. So we got to differentiate those two things. And now that we've differentiated those two things, let's talk about apologies, what they mean. I'm somebody who values a good apology. What I mean by a good apology is that it comes from a place of accountability. All right, so there's two ways we can look at how to apologize. Once is like a weak, more or less simp or beta male type, which doesn't help your relationships and it doesn't help you. All right, when we think of never apologize, I think that's what most people are thinking of. The type of I'm sorry or the type of I'm apology, which really puts it on the other person to have pity over you because you feel shameful for what you've done. All right. So let's talk about the wrong apology. The wrong apology is where a guy is telling his girl that he's sorry to try to make her feel better. Right. He may not even understand where the injury or cost is to her. He just wants her to feel better. So he feels bad because she feels bad and she's mad at him. So he says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. You please forgive me." And it's from this place of shame. And so now, not only has she been injured or received a cost for his behavior, she now has to get injured twice, rather, or have twice the cost, because now she has to bag her feelings and emotions in order to accept this guy's apology and basically say, no, don't shame yourself. You're okay. You're a good boy. Don't worry. You're a good boy. Right. And she has to now bag her own emotions, put those on the back burner put the cost of what happened on the back burner to make this guy feel better because he feels shameful. That's how most apologies are done in relationships when men do it. And it's absolutely weak and it's absolutely wrong. You have no frame when you do that. The girl loses attraction and desire. And more importantly, she has no sense. The reason she's being upset over something you've done is because there was some sort of cost to her, either emotionally or logistically, physically, whatever. There's some sort of fault that happened to her. And she wants to know that you're going to make those some amends to correct whatever harm was caused, if possible, and more importantly, not to continue to do harm in the future. Her main goal is to know that her future outcome is going to be taken care of by the guy she trusts. And if you're sitting there doing a simp apology, which is not really understanding her at all and having any understanding for her and where that cost, where she feels the cost was, and where now her distrust of you is at because of what happened. If you're doing no effort into trying to understand that, but instead just trying to, you're feeling bad about what you've done, you're feeling shameful. Well, shame and guilt comes from a place of not correcting a problem. Okay. Accountability is what solves problems. Shame and guilt actually puts you in the framework of repeating those problems again. So now she's getting messages that you're not actually going to fix anything because you feel all this shame. Because shame's happening because the message you're saying with shame is that I'm really the type of douchebag who will continue to do this wrong thing and not correct it. And I feel, embarrassed by that. So that's why I have all this shame. And not only that, I need you, young lady that I've decided to be in a sexual relationship with, I need you to lift me up and tell me I'm a good boy, because my self-esteem and self-confidence is broken now because of this massive character flaw that I have that's going to make me continue to do the things that you're upset about. That's the message you send when you apologize or say, I'm sorry. Oh, and then you buy her flowers or you try to take her somewhere nice or all of that stuff is the wrong way to approach an apology, and it puts you out of frame. So some of these like red pill dudes that say never apologize, they're really just saying don't do that. Okay. And that's the correct side of it, is don't do that. Okay. That type of I'm sorry, that type of apology, like that doesn't give you the accountability you need to do better in the future. And it doesn't give her any confidence in you. And it really doesn't correct anything either, for as far as like it doesn't, make amends or try to repair any damage. You know what I mean? That if there's any damage that can be repaired. So that's the way not to do an apology. All right. That said, apologies are like bringing a girl flowers in this way. If I bring my girl flowers, it's not a beta male or a simp getting a girl flowers. It's an alpha male getting a girl flowers. Right? Whereas if some simpy guy who doesn't see his value, right, and doesn't have a value in his relationships and is busy placating to his wife or whatever, when that guy gets his wife flowers, it's a simp or a beta getting a girl flowers. The act of getting the girl flowers isn't in itself alpha or beta. It's in the way it's done, and it's within the person who is doing it. The person who is doing it is going to cause them to show up to that action differently. And that's what makes, and then that girl's reaction is going to be way different. When I was really young, I've been on the simp side of it. The simp version who brings a girl flowers. I'm embarrassed to tell you that as a very, very young man, I have done that before. Okay. And I will tell you, being on both sides of it, the reaction from the girl is completely different when you're seen as the alpha male or that, that dominant male force in her life who sees his own value and you bring something for your girl, like flowers or whatever, it's seen and received and appreciated way differently than a guy who's placating to his girl. Okay. Well, that is the same as your apology and your accountability. When I take accountability for doing something wrong to my girl, with my girl, because I made a mistake, that is seen as the dominant guy who can be trusted in her future well-being, recognizing and empathizing with her, recognizing where the wrong or the fault happened. And it's demonstrating a capability of me being able to take care of that in the future. Okay. And so never admitting fault, or and when I say fault, maybe it's not necessarily fault, but I could have done this better. Being that person is not a strong person. That's a weak person. It could be a narcissistic person, but narcissistic people are inherently weak because the personality disorder, um, you know, it clouds their objectivity. You know what I'm saying? And so that's, you don't want to be that person who can never admit fault, never admit maybe there's a better way. Do an after action. I don't want the guy, let's take in a military circumstance. I don't want the guy on my team where when we have the after action review, he can't take criticism, thinks he's perfect, and never takes accountability. I don't want that guy. Okay, that guy can go someplace else. That guy's going to be a terrible person to operate with, because you'll never get better. You'll never make any improvements with that guy. And so you send the message with accountability and the way in which you might apologize. Okay, you send that message that you have got this under control, that you empathize with the girl, you understand her, therefore, and your goal is to make sure that she's taken care of and that the relationship's taken care of, and that your solutions in the future and actions are going to be better suited towards that. You send all the good messages when an apology or accountability is done correctly. You don't always have to say, I'm sorry. You don't always have to say, I apologize, but looking at her and having that tone of voice after spending time having listened to her, spending time having, to understand her point of view and saying, hey, you know what? That thing that happened earlier, I know that really upset you. I understand why. And I just wanted to say, I apologize for that. Okay. That's not something that should have happened. And I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. All right. Or do my best to do that. There's nothing wrong. Saying it just like that. No excuses, no daring, no bullshit. Okay. That is a dominant way of doing it. All right. And if you're doing everything else right, then it'll be received that way. Now let's talk about the framework and the boundaries we have. Okay. So that we can make sure that her response to that accountability is going to be conducive for a healthy relationship, that she's not going to use that response in order to have a means of devaluing you. Okay. And so I'll look at some comments here. What do we got here? Thank you again for the super chat, Lord Venom. I don't know why I said your name like that. Lord Venom. All right. Just sending a chat to show support. Thanks, bro. I appreciate it, man. Really, genuinely. Thanks for everything you do. Can't wait to see you in the next webinar, next round of Inner Game Healing. Yes. Inner Game Healing, June 29th. I think that's a good announcement to make. I will have an affiliate link. You guys can sign up with me on the 29th when we roll it out. Get on my email list, by the way, not just for spam, but for actionable stuff. I got a few some articles with more actionable information, things I often can't talk about on YouTube, things that are different, and giving you examples and vignettes and guys I've coached with and work with. That stuff's all in the email list. It's all for free. So get on that list. And other than announcements for different things that I might be doing, there's really no spam like that, right? And so Inner Game Healing will be something we'll be doing on the 29th. And we'll have 4 expert inner game people, myself included. I will do more announcements as we get closer to that enrollment. That is coming up on the 29th. So we'll say that. Dude, I look forward to working with you there too. And thanks for the support, man. Here's a good question. What about when you're not sorry? When you say not sorry, what does that mean? you think you're in the right with what happened. So you have to describe. So the question is, what about when you're not sorry? That's actually not as simple of a question as it sounds. What does it mean to be not sorry? Okay. Does that mean you don't feel any shame or guilt? Well, okay, good. You shouldn't anyway. Was there something that could have been done better, that you need to take accountability for? That may not warrant an apology, but maybe it warrants a discussion, right? So that could be a thing. Um, and so when you're righteously not sorry, so I'm going to assume what you mean by that is that righteously not sorry. So in other words, you're right when what you did was right. And so when that's a great question. So now you think that you did the best course of action and you don't want to you don't have no shame or there's no it shouldn't be any shame or guilt, but there's nothing really to take accountability for. It was a correct course of action. The difference is in this case there's a conflict, which means that the girl isn't happy about it, right? But you know it was right. She's not happy about it. Okay. So what you do is you go back to those videos I did on Luca and you try to understand why she's not happy about it. All right. And then from there, you get that clarity of and understanding. You get that understanding of why she's not happy about it. You may already know why she's not happy about it, but you still want to give her the opportunity to express her point of view. And you want to make a clarity statements that states that you understand where she's coming from. So this is what needs to be done more often than apologies. Okay. I'm not saying again, I'm saying apology done the right way is a good thing. However, apologies should be pretty rare. What's actually should be done more often is understanding the person through that Luca format. Okay, Luca stands for listen, understand, clarity, and action. Do a search on my channel. You will find a couple videos, one live stream and one shorter, too long, didn't read 9-minute version of Luca. Luca is a skill set. It's a communication model. And so you use that communication model during a conflict. That's how you handle a conflict. So you don't do the deering stuff, right? Which is, making excuses, rationalizing, explaining, getting defensive. Okay. And so you and both her too don't fall into toxic communication patterns that erode relationships. The things like contempt, things like criticism and attacking the other person, stonewalling, defensiveness, right? Arrogance in general, and coming to these conversations with arrogance on either side. These things, okay, so you can fight fairly and cleanly, so to speak. You're using the Luca format that fits the best with how your brain works and how her brain works. Okay. And what it does is, and I won't rehash those entire videos. You need to go back and watch those. But yeah, no, thank you. They're, I need to rewatch those videos. Yes, thank you. And really everybody, the 9-minute version, I did, the clip of it. So you guys can rewatch that and really absorb that as a tool in your toolbox. But more than apologies, that's what needs to be done. She really just needs to know that she is understood so that she can trust your leadership to, get her to her goals. If you're saying, no, we're not doing it that way or whatever, or we're not compliant to your wishes right now because it's not the best answer, but she does know that you care about her needs and you understand her needs, then she'll have the confidence in knowing that even though she may disagree, that she can at least trust and follow you. And, even if it doesn't work, you guys can handle it, right? Like it builds that sense of security in her, even if there's a disagreement, And so when you do something that you think is the best course of action, instead of explaining why it's the best logically, when she feels injured or harmed from that course of action, you're better off trying to understand why she feels that way. And then when she feels like you understand her, then she's going to have more trust. And then she's going to be more apt to, when you make those clarity statements, especially more apt to understand why you took the course of action you did, and at least at the very least, not be resentful and be in compliance, going forward. And that compliance grows to understanding and also agreement later on. So yeah, check out those videos. Those are good ones to look at. So back to the apology, right? So like you should do apologies when you screw up. It's yet all you're doing is you're saying in the apology, I understand the injury and I understand that I didn't do exactly what you would expect or what your standards are. And I understand that. And the implied task is that I'm going to work to change that in the future. So if she feels understood and she feels like you understand, you know, where she, took an L, so to speak, because of your decisions or behaviors, and you understand those things and that you're, compassionate and empathetic towards, how she feels about it, then she's going to be accepting a lot more of mistakes. The reason why a girl is less apt to accept the mistakes and add them up in their head and try to hold resentment for them is when she thinks that they're not going to, be taken care of in the future to get her needs met. You know what I'm saying? And so that's where she will start to get that resentment. All right. No, sorry, let me clear this up. Isn't rationalization and dear the same thing as understand and Luca? No, no, it's not. You need to go watch those videos. Okay, it's not at all. All right, because understand is simply you trying to understand her perspective. So the stands for listen to the words she's saying. The U stands for the understand, which means you're trying to understand what she's not saying. Okay. So this is training you and putting you mindful as the guy to use those social skills we're talking about here that a girl tends to be more genetically predisposed to than you. You have to remind yourself that, okay, I'm hearing the words she's saying, but what emotions is she having? Why does she feel the way that she feels about the words? What is she not telling me? What is it about what she's saying, what happened that she isn't saying that I should probably need to know that's relevant? What are her behaviors showing me? Her behaviors before, now, after, during events, like how do those match or not match what she's saying right now? So it's getting a full understanding of her motivations and perspective through both the direct communication, which is the words she's saying, that's the listening, and the indirect communication, which is what understanding is. Instead of thinking about your rebuttal, which most people do in conflicts, you're thinking about what all of these aspects of what she's saying and not saying and everything else about her. And you're trying to have, radical acceptance of it and empathy without judgment first. Now, from there, to make sure that you're understanding and have awareness of everything that every place she's coming from, that's when you get clarity. Or you either repeat a statement back that summarizes in your words what her perspective is and what you think she's feeling like, or you're asking questions to try to better understand things that either don't make sense or are incongruent, or that that you just need some clarity on. And then after all of that, instead of you talking about your feelings and trying to get her to understand you, all this stuff, you just come up with the action plan. Here's what we're doing moving forward. Right. And that's all you need to do as a leader. Okay. If you want her to understand your emotions and feelings, get a therapist. All right. And I'm not saying that it's not her job to try to understand you. She has her own set of things to do. Right. And I give that in an acronym as well. So go watch the video. All right. That's about as much as I'm going to talk about that. Yeah. So you're asking more questions about, watch the video. Watch the video. And then if you still have questions, throw it in the comment section of that video. I'll see your comments and I'll answer there. I just don't want to re-explain an hour and a half podcast in a 9-minute video. All right. So watch the 9-minute video first. If you still need more clarity, watch the podcast. I mean, stuff's here for free, man. So just go check it out and you'll get it, bro. So you'll get it. But it's good. It's very valuable. It's worth a watch. For those of you who have seen it, you let my man know here. It is worth your time to check it out. Okay. So yeah, your apology comes from a place of being an alpha male who is taking accountability. Nothing wrong with that. Just taking responsibility. Now, here's the thing. The boundary and the expectation is that she does it too. Okay. And that's the part that can be complicated. But the boundary and expectation that you have for both of you guys is that you both take accountability. All right. Now, do women struggle with accountability? All right. And so let's look at some research on that because it's interesting to see what that shows. Because now, first, I'll look at, and I'll put this in the chat. I'm just going to take some things from it because I'm not going to. So, this article in the chat here, boom. All right. So, this isn't a study or anything, but this is, so we'll get out of that article there. Oop. All right. So, that article was written by a counselor, Dr. Psych Mom, little blog there. Why your wife will never say she's wrong. Okay. Many men tell me that their wives will never admit that they are wrong. And honestly, I see this more than the gender inverse in couple counseling. Many women struggle with admitting they are wrong instead of being a narcissist, and instead of this being a narcissistic issue, although certainly sometimes it is, it really stems from massive insecurity and low self-esteem. Okay. And so what she goes on to, and I'll read this next paragraph, is worth it. And then that's probably it for this article. Many women struggle with depression, and the most common is atypical depression. One hallmark of this is rejection sensitivity. This means that your wife is so sensitive to being potentially rejected or criticized that she is highly defensive when she feels that others think she is wrong. An example of how this manifests, she gives an example, whatever. Depending on how fragile she is emotionally, she may or may not be able to admit to herself that she is wrong, and certainly will not admit it if she feels she is being attacked. If she is rejection sensitive, any comment will feel like an attack. Note that fear of disapproval manifests differently in men. Okay. And so that is, fundamentally true, which a lot of research doesn't want to suss this out, So a lot of research isn't really getting into overtly the lack of female accountability in relationships. But we know anecdotally it's true because she is a counselor and is saying so, but not just her. Counselors and therapists who do couple counselings, they don't want to say it a lot of times because they're trying to be politically correct. They don't want to have, they don't want the woke mafia to come after them. But they don't want the female sisterhood to come after them, right? But the reality is accountability is not as common in the relationship, right? Women are often not taking ownership for the things that they've done in the same way that men are doing. We know this anecdotally. We don't have any research to prove it that I know of. Okay, that's worth anything, because it's something they're not going to look into. But because what researcher wants to, it's going to be considered a misogynistic, endeavor just from the get-go or from the start. So no university or body of, no university study is going to fund or support research that would point out that women have an accountability problem. I don't know where that would come from, because that is not, politically correct. In our cancel culture, I don't know a single researcher that wants to put their ass on the line for that. And I don't know of much funding that would go towards that. And I'm not finding much that is worth a grain of salt. Okay. Either. That said, though, we know it's true because we're experiencing it and we see it. Men are saying it, and counselors who are on the other end objectively are saying that they see that all the time. Now, lack of accountability comes in all genders. So men often can be lacking accountability as well. So no, this is not saying that only women do it, but the motivations for women are different than men, and the commonality of it in women isn't expressed very well. So now what you have is like communities of guys who feel like they're being gaslit, because you kind of are, right? Like, men are being told women are always right, right? And then if you're like, wait a second, what about there seems to be a lack of accountability here, and then it's screech, you're a misogynist. See what I mean? So like, men cannot have healthy conversation. It's like we're being gaslit as men universally, even by research and even by the psychological community, because we get to hear how women are always right, and all this, and then of course, yeah, so we get to, there's a lack of accountability that we've all experienced from females, and even women know that about other women, and yet we try to put something definitive to it, and it's not. It's now being, more or less shamed and marginalized, right? And so that's something that we see, but we know and we understand it, and she's expressing it. And what she's expressing is the possibility that maybe there's a lot of ego protection here. So is that true? And what can we use? And why is that true? And can we use that information to help us in our relationships? So let's find out. Okay, so the question, here's where some counter research happens. Do women apologize more than men? Now, when they do these studies, they find that women take more accountability than men. And so here this is interesting, but I'll tell you why that is in this study. All right. So the modern blue-pilled Kool-Aid drinking pleb world out there thinks that women are more likely to apologize and more likely to take accountability and more likely to take that ownership and all this, and more likely to have shame or guilt and remorse for what they've done wrong than men. That's that's the trope that's out there, is that women are more likely, to do this than men, right? And so where does that come about? Well, it's kind of like the gaslighting and the manipulation that happens in a gynocentric world that does that, but then they have research to back it up, and I've tagged one of them. So why women apologize more than men, gender differences and thresholds for perceiving offensive behavior. And so when they do this study, they find that women, apologized more, but what it is, it's not that they apologized more, it's that they perceived more offenses, and then they apologized on par to those offenses. So in other words, they weren't apologizing more than men. There weren't these perceived offenses that they didn't apologize for, is that they, have these perceived offenses and they apologize for them at the same rate that men had these perceived offenses and the men apologize for those. So the rates of apology were between, the offenses versus the apology was the same. So there's no real difference in this study between men and women in terms of when they perceived they did something wrong in this case and then apologized, right? So this would indicate this idea that women will take accountability when they are perceived wrong. Um, but that doesn't show up in relationships. And we know that through our observations. So, what's going on here? What's different about these things than this data? So, when you hear some article or somebody say or whatever, it's sort of common knowledge or thoughts that women are more compassionate than men and they take more accountability. They're more likely to apologize and all this stuff. And then like you hear that in like the blue pilled world and you're like, wait a second, I know that that's bullshit. And then you're like, well, that doesn't seem to be true. That my last three exes could never admit to fault. And then everyone, some of the guys will laugh at you. Some of the guys will just go, women just being women or whatever. Some of the guys will try to defend, and the women will try to defend them. Well, you were probably screwing up all the time, and nobody will admit the fact that women seem to have a shortage of accountability in relationships. Not all women, not all relationships. Let me just clarify that. My girlfriend, for example, has an extreme amount of accountability. She has a lot of accountability, and it's a requirement for me. And I have accountability. Like we both bring that to a relationship. That needs to be done. Okay. However, I'm talking about relationships as a whole. There's a lack of that, right? We know that, but then we see research like this. So what is this saying? We got to look at, and this is why we got to think about how things connect together. Think a bit more like an economist when we're dealing with social scenarios. Okay. Women apologize more than men because in the study they were using offensive behavior. So when looking at behavior that would be perceived as offensive to other people publicly, socially, women would notice when they were hypersensitive to other people's needs and more sensitive about what would be perceived as offensive, and then more apt to make those amends or apologize for any of those offensive behaviors. Whereas men were less likely to perceive offensive behavior. When they perceived it, they apologized or whatever, took accountability, right? In this, they use the word apologize in the study. When they perceived it was there. But what that says really isn't about so much. It doesn't say that women apologize less or more than men. It says that women perceive more faults or wrongs and take accountability for those in social situations where offense is perceived. All right. That's what that says. It doesn't make the same conclusion about how they're going to show up to their boyfriend or husband. It states, though, how they're showing up when everyone's looking at them. All right. When they're going to be socially perceived, now this is the behavior, which is being more sensitive to other people's needs and perceived offenses, and then being willing to apologize or make those amends to try to make other people feel comfortable. Well, I would say that's true. As a guy, and most guys, we don't give a shit quite as much oftentimes. I'm really guilty about this. To my own demise in my past, I've not given a shit about what people thought about me. I'm better at that now. You should actually care about how you're perceived socially. Okay. It's a whole nother discussion. Not care in terms of, like letting it affect your mental point of origin, but you should give a shit about how you're perceived because that's part of being socially aware. You know what I mean? And socially congruent. And so like, I've been that sort of dominant dude who didn't give a shit and would off put everybody. That's not really I've been that guy in my past. That's not really somebody you should really be showing up as, right? But women are way more sensitive for what other people think about them. And women are more apt to try to make others feel comfortable or make those amends or whatever. I mean, just as a whole, you have some domineering, bitchy women who won't do that, right? But it's actually feminine behavior in a good way to be considerate of other people socially, and that consideration and not wanting to offend somebody or bother somebody or, and wanting, if there's that perception of that, to say, oh, I'm sorry, or, oh, I'm sorry I was too loud there, or I hope I'm not disturbing you, or, any of that stuff. I mean, that's definitely a true thing, right? Like that's when they do take that accountability. So what we are seeing and what we'll see with other research here is that accountability happens for women when they are being perceived by the social environment, right? And there's certain things that women feel that they want to take accountability for, and that they don't mind apologizing or saying, "Hey, sorry, I was wrong for that." And then there's other things that they don't want to take accountability for. All right. So what we're seeing is that there's a difference between what we would consider something you need to take accountability for between men and women and how we think. And there's things that women do to save face with certain things and in their relationships, but will behave differently socially and in front of everybody, right? And so when it comes to saving face, that accountability is there if it's going to make her be perceived as I've said before, a good chimp, right? And men tend not to care as much because we just want to be useful chimps. Okay. So that's what that research says. So now we start to um look at my notes here. So basically in that men just didn't feel the guilt or feel that it was, their behavior was offensive enough to need to apologize for it, right? Um and so these studies that say women take more accountability, they're focused on social perceptions. Well, we know that women are more sensitive and and we'll say compassionate to others when it comes to social situations. That's not necessarily how they are in their interpersonal relationships, like behind closed doors. So their close friendships, their relationships, that is not necessarily how things are, which is why a lot of women will attest that a lot of women backstab, you know, and they will say one thing and do another, or some of these things, because the way they behave personally behind closed doors may not be the same way that they're presenting in front of others. And so in front of others, they're trying to increase their social status, intersexual competition, right? Their social perception. They don't want to be perceived as a bad person socially, whereas they're less concerned about that and they're more concerned about having other needs met privately. So those things sometimes will not match up. And then that's when girls can be seen as being backstabbing. A lot of girls report that about their female friendships, right? So let's look at some other stuff. What we did find, though, in terms of responsibility, so women will apologize no problem when it comes to things they don't care about and if their social perceptions are on the line. The problem with the relationship and the things about accountability in the relationship is women will tend to do less things to to take responsibility for less things. In other words, they'll tend to not do things or not put themselves in a decision making position or not do certain actions. They will take less accountability, less responsibility, be less proactive with certain things. And then if it doesn't work out or the outcomes don't turn out, then it's not their fault. You see, then they can blame they look at the guy who made those decisions, right? And so how do we know that? So we look at this one, and I'll put this up there. Okay, so again, those who are following, um, microcultures operate differently. Yes, they do. There is a cultural element to this for sure. All right. And I'll get to that too. So here's another point of research. And so this one is just showing, as far as gendered research here. So this one's showing, all right, so do women have more shame than men? Oops, that's not the one I wanted. Get out of here. Okay, well, actually, let me go to this one, then I'll go to the next one. So from the abstract, I'll just read it. You guys, there's a whole study you can get a hold of if you want. I've looked at the whole thing, but we analyze how subjects self-assess depends on whether the accuracy is observable to others. We find that women downgrade their self-assessment given observability, whereas men do not. So in other words, when women are being observed, they tend to, you know, downgrade their self-assessment and be more open to being more accountable. This holds true when the self-assessment concerns a task with individuals as well as competitive incentives. Women avoid the shame they may have if others observe that they have overestimated themselves. So in other words, women will tend to be to display less confidence or capability in order to allow for more mistakes, right? So they'll take less, in a way, taking less accountability if they think that the observation from others, like if they, in other words, they give themselves more permission for mistakes, right? They tend to downplay themselves if they can be observed by others, whereas men don't seem to be shame averse. In other words, a man can say, well, yeah, here's my abilities. Sometimes a guy will overestimate his abilities and then fail. Right? So this gender difference may be due to different social expectations, and we find that men are expected to be overconfident, women are not. The negative effect on women's self-assessment is eliminated when performance is only imperfectly observable. So when they can, this goes back to deception, when they can conceal, okay, their performance, then they are less likely to downgrade their abilities, right? When they can conceal it. But when it's open and observable, then they're going to sort of downgrade their abilities and allow for more mistakes. Shame aversion may explain recent findings that women shy away from competition, demanding jobs, and wage negotiations, as entering these situations demonstrates confidence in one's abilities. So one of the things we see then in that, and then I'll bounce to the next study, is that we see that, okay, there's a general lack of confidence and women tend to be very shame averse. This goes back to what I've always been saying, that women want to be seen by the social environment as good, right? And so they want to be the good chimp. And so they're less likely to put themselves in positions where they could let down other people, less likely to put themselves in positions of responsibility and accountability. Or if they do, they're less likely to promote their abilities, and they're less likely to compete, right? Whereas men are inherently more competitive. Okay. This all ties into accountability and relationships too. All right. And so that brings me to the next one, which is okay, we got that one. Sorry, let me trying to find this. Did I click on the last one? What is that one? Oh, it looks like I clicked the same thing. Hold on. Okay, well, I didn't have it. Let me see if I had the article on my phone here. I cannot paraphrase it either way. So, what do we have here? So this one is looking at different attitudes of men and women practitioners in responsibility and competence. So let me copy this. I'll send it to my notes and I'll post it in a second here. Okay. But so this study was looking at basically confidence and feelings of competence and taking more responsibility. Okay. And so what they showed in this one was that they determined part of the study involved determining whether women doctors accept greater responsibility and feel more competent than men when undertaking those tasks which they are said to be suited. So, and when they did the study, they found that for more or less, we could say, gendered related tasks, they felt confident and would accept responsibility in those tasks. However, and these are doctors, men and women, okay? But for other medical tasks, including those of a technical and traditional nature, the men felt both more responsible and felt more confident than women respondents. Contrary to expectations, women did not accept more responsibility or feel more confident than men for uh, psychosocial tasks. So even the whatever psychosocial would be like talking to the patient, being compassionate, things like that. All right, they did not feel as competent or in other these other related medical tasks, technical and traditional nature, they did not feel as competent, and they did not feel and they were not taking responsibility and doing more things into that. So they were more risk averse then of making mistakes. So what does not being as proactive mean, right? Well, that means that they're not that women are more risk averse, and they're not going to make, they're they're not doing things that's going to put them in a place of making mistakes, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. So let me put this in. Sorry, I'm trying to do two things here. Um, I want to put this in the chat too, because a lot of people like the research. So, all right, here we go. Bang. So we got that. Okay. So these are, evaluating doctors. So these are not like dumb girls. These are smart women who work in the medical field, and they're being evaluated with the males, and they had their test samples. And what they found was the women were less apt, to take, and this was done a little while ago. This was done like a couple decades ago now. But still, not much, how much has fundamentally changed since then about their role. And so they were less likely to so in other words, women were less likely to do things they felt less confident in doing, and therefore wouldn't have to take accountability or responsibility for those things. So we know that about, let's say, medical profession, in a place where, they're all doctors. So credentially speaking, they're equals, right? In profession. The men and the women they're equals in that they both have, are both medical doctors, right? But despite being equal by credentials and role and in title, women took on less tasks, were less proactive in doing things that would require, cause them to have to take more responsibility, that they were less confident in. So how does this translate then to our relationships? Well, the problem isn't, the problem is can be in women apologizing, but what we're really seeing is that women will do less, that women don't want to be wrong. They're more risk averse. And so a lot of times they will do less things to take which would require them to take responsibility and then have to be wrong by that thing, right? This boils down to, let's look at certain things. Why does the woman want the guy to pick the restaurant, for example, right? Well, because if the place sucks, she doesn't want to be responsible for that decision, is part of the reasoning. You see what I'm saying? So she wants the strong guy to make the decision, but then, of course, he's responsible for the decision. And then if the place sucks, he's got that accountability. And that's just a small thing, restaurant selection, but it's a good illustration. And now when we start getting into other things, behaviors, goals, actions, whatever, she's more likely to put the guy in a position of decision making or action, and then be on the back end criticizing the decision, right? Versus putting herself in that position, and then, of course, being on the back end of the criticism. So I'm not saying that should change, by the way. As a man, you're leading the relationship, so you should be making more decisions. But as a consequence of that, that means that you're going to have more mistakes. So you making more decisions means that there's going to be more mistakes. There's going to be more less than optimal or, less than good outcomes based on your decisions, you know, and that's okay. So you want to accept that. And then you want to illustrate that frame in the relationship that, hey, I'm not always going to make the best decision because I'm human, but it doesn't matter because even if it's not the best decision or the outcomes aren't the best, it'll be fine, right? We'll be good. You know what I mean? It's either not going to be a big consequence or we'll correct it. We'll be fine. And so having confidence, but also recognizing your humanness. And this is where it comes to selection too. If you select a woman who is ungrateful, you would select a woman who is entitled, you would select a woman who doesn't have a mindset towards forgiveness and holds grudges, well, you're going to be in a position of leadership making decisions. She's going to be holding grudges and resenting every little thing that doesn't turn out the way she wants. And then she's going to start trying to dominate those decisions or treating you with disrespect. Some women are in that framework to begin with, and they bring that unhealthy mindset to a relationship. And then you guys pick those women and decide to try to, wife them up or move them in with you. That's the part where you need to vet that out. And when you see a woman who's ungrateful and entitled and blame shifting, you're not selecting that chick for a long-term relationship. I don't care what her TNA looks like. I don't care, what, how pretty she is. I don't care what her other thing or her attributes are. All right. Because the reality is you bring that person into your life, you're going to have a shitty time because she's going to have all these toxic traits. And so we know that she's not going to put herself in a place to take responsibility to begin with, based on this isn't the only study, based on some research. And what we can deduce is that's part of female nature. It makes sense. They don't want to be in charge in a relationship. They don't even want to be in charge when they're doctors in a medical facility working with other men. So why would they definitely don't want to be in charge. It's not part of their nature. All right. That's a good thing. Don't expect them to be in charge, but that means you'll be the one to make more mistakes and you'll be the one to sometimes you won't apologize all the time. That's never what I suggest. If you do something that's clearly morally wrong, I do suggest that in that accountability. But if you just make a bad choice, big deal. Expect in your relationships a standard of forgiveness and a standard of acceptance and a standard of gratitude rather than entitlement. And you need to treat your partner that way because you're going to set the example. Okay. So that's something that you want to look at and evaluate. All right. Now, what we really are seeing here is that women are more shame averse, but also they experience shame differently. And what they consider is shameful is different. Okay. And so I'll put this, it's not a study, but it's just an article. All right. And so what they experience is different. And so here's, this, and it's from a book called The Gifts of Imperfection Defines Love based on her research on shame. Okay. And so things that women tend to feel shame for in the US and Canada are things like being domestic and not being good. So things of not being good enough domestically, right? And her roles of taking care of the home, family, things, not being good caretaker of children, not being nice or kind, right, to others. Pursuing a thin body ideal is something that they could feel shame over if not succeeding in that. Showing modesty by not calling attention to her talents and abilities. That goes back to that other research of not, overestimating herself, right? And tending to underestimate, because again, she wants to give herself room for mistake. Investing in a romantic relationship keeping sexual intimacy contained to the committed relationship, not hoeing around, right? All that, using resources to invest in the appearance. These are things that, she would consider being feminine and considers, those are things that the shame would revolve around. And so in the research, she looks at, you know, some ways of she defined it or outlined or look perfect, be perfect, do perfect. Anything less than that is shame. Being judged by other mothers, being exposed, okay, the flawed parts of herself, she wants to hide, or being exposed to others is a huge thing for her. She doesn't want that. um this feeling of all her, like, no matter what she does, it'll never be enough. So you'll notice that a lot of feeling of not being enough and not being good enough in a lot of these things. And so that's what a lot of women combat, is not being good enough and feelings of not being good enough, which is why they get, triggered and upset when they hear a bunch of men talking and saying that women never take accountability. Because the reality is, though, about things that they find important, that they find a part of their feminine identity, especially, they feel a lot of shame around that. And they see that, they feel not good enough, is what it boils down to. Women fundamentally, even the most pretty whatever girl on earth, has insecurities. They have these insecurities and feelings of never being good enough, never pretty enough, never being socially good enough, never being good enough for their boyfriend, never being good enough sexually. You'll see that theme if you actually spend time with women. You'll see that as a theme of not being good enough and then trying to ego protect or hide from that. That's why apologies and accountability are in short order in relationships. That's why it's harder for them, because it's this feeling of shame and not being good enough. And it's a deeper, more broad feeling that seems to be ingrained in women, regardless of where their culture is. It seems to be universal. It shows up different culturally. Some women embrace femininity better than others and will feel shame differently. Women now in the West, in the US, in England, Europe, Australia, women now, okay, in those first world countries, are trying to compete with men and will feel like shame if they're not. They feel double shame, which is why they're can be so kind of bitchy and hard to be around, because they feel shame that they're not the body ideal. They feel shame that they're not the feminine ideal. And they also feel shame that they're not doing everything a man can do, because they've been conditioned socially that their value as a woman is being as good as men in all the male traits and tasks and things, and having the ideal in femininity. So now to women in the West, it's even worse. The accountability is even harder, because you have to understand the reason why people avoid accountability and avoid apology and avoid these things is because they're ego protecting. They're protecting their ego. They don't want others to see them as less than they want to see themselves. They want others, they less than they want you to see them. And so now she's with you, a romantic partner. She doesn't want you to see her as less, because she knows that puts her in an unsafe place of being devalued. And she has all this shame to begin with because she's not meeting her feminine ideals, and that's never enough. And if she's, let's say, in the United States, right, or she's not only been told that she's not meeting her feminine ideals, in a lot of ways sometimes she's not, but she's not meeting the masculine ideals either that she's supposed to also meet. And so now this makes a woman really feeling inadequate. What happens when someone's feeling inadequate? What happens when they feel like they're not enough and they have to ego protect? A lot of maladaptive things, overcompensation, being aggressive and unpleasant towards others, being overly defensive, right? Being very insecure and taking those insecurities out on others, being very risk averse and responsibility averse. Even entitlement can come from this as an ego protection. You see, this is where the source of a lot of this comes, is that girl isn't feeling like she's enough, and culture and society is reinforcing that. She's already had it ingrained to think that women have inherent shame and insecurity just as part of their genetic predisposition. So where they're socially, right, more evolved than men, their inner game and feelings of self-worth is a little bit compromised in comparison to men, just as far as how their brain works, right? And being, having to be risk averse for their own survival when they relied on men for protection and men for resources through most of our history. That's what caused this sort of development. And now you're socially engineering or conditioning things as well to believe that men are terrible, masculinity is bad, and that women have to be all powerful and have to be better at all of the male things as well as fitting a female ideal. And then, of course, you see the cartoon of that presented in movies, right? And in our media, it's always the girl who's pretty and strong and independent, and all of a sudden she picks up the gun and can shoot the gun better than all the trained guys, and she beats the guy's ass in some revenge porn scenario, right? And then, and all the guys are incompetent. She's got to come to the rescue. Like, we see this fantasy play itself out over and over again. It's not just degrading to men, it's degrading to women and to the femininity and qualities they bring to the table and the things that women are classically good at. And it's also sort of putting unrealistic expectations on women. The people that put unrealistic expectations on women are not the misogynistic men, right? It's really not. The people that put that on are the women. Other women put that on each other for intersexual competition. Women are the ones who are trying to, out skinny the other girl, right? When guys like a certain amount of curves, for example, like women are the ones putting that kind of pressure on each other. All right. They're the ones feeling the shame. They're the ones, other women are putting pressure on mothers. Other women are putting pressure on them to not be subservient to a man and to be able to do better than all the men. That's where this is coming from, right? And so this is why we are inside. So when you pick up this girl to be in a relationship, she has massive insecurities, doing huge ego protection, and some of that stuff comes out as really bad and flawed behavior, things that are not conducive of relationship success. All right. So now what do you do? Well, having the awareness is, first of all, having compassion, having understanding is good. That's first of all. Second of all is in reinforcing the framework that we're different and better than what the rest of society is doing, because if you are, leading your relationship into a happy place, most people are not leading their relationships into a happy place. So you are better than what everyone else is doing. And in that framework, you take accountability. You take accountability as a guy, and she does. And in that framework, too, taking accountability makes her a better girl than the other girls. So the framework is that by being somebody who can apologize and take accountability, you're more valuable and better. To me, this is one of the things that makes you special versus other just chicks out there who are just doing their thing. You know what I mean? What makes it, not everybody else needs to have that, to see her faults, but you guys are allowed to see each other's faults. And then the last part is that there's a radical acceptance of those imperfections. You're not going to be perfect as a man, but that doesn't make you less of a man. That doesn't make you not her hypergamous option. In fact, your confidence about your imperfections and your lack of ego protection is what's going to make you more alpha and a better leader and make her see you as that best option, believe it or not. Okay. When you're not ego protecting like that. And for her, though, she has to understand too that you're not going to shame her and hold things over her head. Some of you guys are very toxic because you're not used to women taking accountability. And when they start to do a little accountability, you all of a sudden latch onto that and you beat them up over it. You talk it to death. You reference it later. You do all the things that you don't want her to do to you, you do to her. I've seen it client after client with men. So you guys do this shit. And when you do that kind of shit, you're not rewarding accountability. You have to understand that she has huge opposition when it comes to taking accountability and ownership because she has massive feelings of insecurities and having to protect her ego, and the social environment that she is way more sensitive to than you is just ready and waiting to judge her for anything she does wrong. And this was what makes her risk averse. This is what makes her taking less responsibility and initiative. And this is what makes her oftentimes avoid apology, and oftentimes will cause blame shifting and even some resentment when those things happen, or when she's spotlighted for doing things wrong. So she has way more opposition than you do as a man to accepting fault and responsibility. All right, on a psychological and social level, at least that's how she perceives it. And she is not in the leadership role, so she is even more concerned for how you feel about her. You guys think you're concerned about how she feels about you. Well, if you're the dominant leader, you're actually less concerned than how she feels about you, being more or less the submissive that's following you and relying on you for her needs. You see what I mean? And so she's more worried about how you feel about her, even though you think you're worried or whatever. Right. And so having that empathy and understanding, you have to build a different frame around your relationship, that you guys are different and that accountability is good. And accountability is what makes her better than her peers. And you reinforce that through positive reinforcement, not the negative reinforcement that you guys tend to fall to, which is, oh, I got her. She admits fault. I'm going to really make her tell me where she went wrong. I'm going to make her explain it. I'm going to reference it later. I'm going to say, well, yeah, remember the time you did this, and it's like giving her massive negative consequences. If my girl does something that she knows that she did something wrong, she's very quick to say, I apologize about that. Or, hey, I'm sorry I was a bitch earlier, or whatever. And what I do, I look at it and I say, you know what? I appreciate you saying that. It's okay. And then I never revisit it again. She needs to know that I accept her for who she is, and I'm not going to punish her for her faults when she's taking the accountability. And this is something you guys need to bring to your relationships. Now, the how to do that, the nuances that are there, you need training. It's that simple. But look at all this shit I cover here you didn't know about. A lot of you guys knew parts of it. You had some awareness. You didn't know all of it. You need training on how to do this. Okay. Stick with me, and that training can happen. I'm here to help. I do recommend one of my programs. The one I advertised is a really good one for you. Hopefully, I'll see you in it. Otherwise, I'll catch you around on the next one. Take care.